prophecies, revelations, economic collapse, martial law, social and civil war, aliens, human hybrids, the Nephilim, great deception, world chaos, tsunamis. Stay tuned for special edition End Time Revelation. Amen, and welcome to another episode of Project Seer. I'm Bill George, and here with me today is Mr. Ceil Murdaugh. Brother Ceil, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm happy to be here and well.
Amen. Well, Merry late Christmas.
Yes, just a little late.
Happy early New Year. And we also have the guest that we had last time we were together.
Yes.
I'll let you introduce her.
Oh, this is my beautiful wife, Edna.
Amen.
She's with us today, and hopefully she'll be more giving of commentary than she has been, because she likes to listen in preference to talking in some places.
But she has a lot to say.
She has a lot to say.
Last week she was saying, well, I don't have that much to say, but she does have a lot to say.
Yes, she does.
And we want her to feel welcome to say it today. I'm trying to, not to ignore you, I'm trying to get us, we're doing a little bit different today. We're actually broadcasting on YouTube, and I'm going to try to get to YouTube and see if I can't share it from YouTube. It looks like I'm there. And we'll try to share this to Facebook, and we'll go on from there. So let's see if this is going to work.
So we'll be seen on Facebook and also over YouTube and heard over the radio.
That's right.
Triple threat.
That's right. We're going to now we're going to go over here and see if we can't share it over there. But while we're trying to do all this, Brother Ceil, we've got a great show today, because we're going to be talking about the year in review, and having had the year that we have had, we should have some great topics here, and
we'll see how much the public has already forgotten about what happened last year.
That's
see
right.
How short memories are.
Yeah. That's right. And again, I do apologize. We're trying to get this all going here and be able to share it here and there and everywhere. And there we go.
So it's not quite as easy as it looks, is it?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So hopefully you'll be able to join us now on Facebook. I know you can get it on my Facebook, Bill George. You should be able to get it on Henry Schaefer's Facebook. You can get it here on YouTube. And you can listen, of course, at 99.9 WUCC here in the studio on our towers in Williston, South Carolina. And we've got a lot to talk about. We're talking about the year in review. And, you know, we've done a lot of shows this past year, Brother Ceil.
Yes, we have.
And even before we took over, Brother Steve and Pastor Shaffer had been doing Project Seer for a long time. And they've had other things come up in their life, as life does. And so they've kind of handed the reins a little bit to us. And from time to time, Brother Shaffer gets to come back and be with us. So we're going to be talking about some of the shows that we've done in the past and some of the things that have been going on. Now, one of the things we're going to start off talking about is deaths. This past year of some famous people. So I've got a list here. I'm just going to read them. If you got a comment, either one of you got a comment, or if there's somebody that I missed and you want to join them in, but we're just going to let our listeners join with us and think about some of the people that we have passed this, who have passed this past year and we've lost. So let me just start out and go right down my list here. And like I said, if you have any comments or anything, just jump right in here. Harry Anderson from Night Court. I don't know if you all remember him or not, but he was the judge on Night Court. And
he also played actually in a movie about Harvey, the Invisible Rabbit, that Jimmy Stewart made famous.
Right. And, you know, I remember one thing about him. I remember Phyllis and I ordered years ago this Italian dinner, and we spent a lot of money on it, you know. And we were a young married couple, and we were going to have this dinner and this night all to ourselves. And he did magic, and he was on the show, and he took a long needle. Just as we were getting ready to eat, he stuck that needle through his arm and then wiggled it through the skin. And when he did that, neither one of us could eat, and all that food we had bought went to waste. But anyhow, that was Harry Anderson. Alan Bean, who was an astronaut, he passed away. And one that I shared with you that I was surprised about, I didn't know he passed this past year, was Ken Berry. Played on Mama's Family and F Troop.
It's hard to realize he was the age he was.
Right. He always looked the same every show that he was in.
And what was his passing? Approximately 80-something years old. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, he sure didn't look like it. He's like you. You don't look like you're that old either. But Ken Berry, Anthony Bourdain, I believe he took his life, but he was on Food Network.
He was.
Barbara and H.W. Bush.
Right.
The president of the United States and his wife.
We lost a lot of leadership. Actually, probably some, and many maybe we may not bring forth.
Right.
But we've lost a lot of leadership.
John McCain,
right.
Senator of, was it Arizona? I think he was senator of.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was Arizona. Presidential candidate, you know.
Yes.
Roy Clark. Well, he was one of my favorite musicians. He was very talented.
He was a very talented, and he's multi-talented. He could do, not only sing, but he could play many instruments.
I remember my dad rushing home saying, calling me up on the phone and saying, Bill, you got to watch this. And I was just a teenager. I said, what? He says, this show Hee Haw. It is so funny. You know, and of course it was pretty funny. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, she died this year. Billy Graham, evangelist Billy Graham, known throughout the world. Stephen Hawkins, a physicist, you know, he played in a lot of movies, even though he was a paraplegic and paralyzed from his neck down, I believe.
Yeah, well, actually, he had Lou Gehrig's disease, which disabled all of the nerves, everything. Normally, people with Lou Gehrig's disease die
pretty quick, yeah.
But he lived many years with it, only being able to move that one finger or whatever, maybe part of one hand for a while. And of course he had to have bodily help all the time. But he lived where I have friends. One in particular I remember dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. And it started off, his voice, you could tell the difference until finally he couldn't talk and things. So Steve Hawkins lived under what I would consider very difficult circumstances for a large number of years.
And kept a good sense of humor about it. And a lot of the shows that he played in, he would kind of do a cameo of himself, and he'd always kind of do a joke about himself. But it was he did die of a horrible disease.
Yes,
I had my insurance. It was a friend of the family, but he was also an insurance man. I'll never forget. I called him about insurance, and when he picked up the phone, he said, "Hi, Bill," and I thought he was joking with me. I said, "Jim, what's the matter?" He says, "I don't know."
Oh.
And then found out he had Lou Gehrig's disease.
Yes,
Just
that's one of the first things that become noticeable.
Yeah. But Tab Hunter, you remember Tab Hunter?
I do.
He passed away this year. Margot Kidder played in Superman. She passed away. Charles Krauthammer, another one that was paralyzed. A lot of people didn't realize that because he'd always have a suit and tie and stuff on the show, you know. But if you watch the show after a while, you would start realizing that he wasn't moving right.
Yeah, he was quadriplegic, and he had no motion of his hands, no free motion of his hands and stuff.
But I just admire these guys because they didn't let that stuff get them down. They still
he was a brilliant man.
They gave a lot to
really
the country.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, let me interrupt just a moment. We know him as a conservative, right? But he began as a Democrat.
That's what I heard,
as a liberal. And situations and circumstances changed. And I think if you would read his obituary, you'd find that there was a definite turning point that drove him into conservatism. But he became a very good commentator and an editor. He wrote a lot of editorials. And he's written books, by the way.
And I'm willing to go out of conservatism if they start doing a bunch of weird stuff too. So, I mean.
Yeah, we'll look for something other than
that's right.
either or and.
I said that about Church of God too. If they do a bunch of weird stuff, I'm gone from there too.
Amen.
Stan Lee died this past year. He did a lot of the comic books and the Spider-Man and all those type of things.
Yeah. Well, was he not the one? Was he the one that did about this little GI that we saw, Beetle Bailey?
Oh no, that was a different gentleman. I don't have his name, but I did see that he passed
also,
too.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I have a little army. Those little plastic army guys.
Yeah.
I have like 3 of them that are Beetle Bailey, which are unusual for the army men. Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela's wife, died.
Yeah.
Jerry Marin Muchin. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't. I read it, but it still didn't ring any bells to me. He's that Munchkin.
The Munchkin guy, yeah. I think he played the mayor or something on the Wizard of Oz. Penny Marshall, who of course was a director, but she was also known as
she began in a show on TV, and then later on she became a producer and director.
Right, and her father, I think, was a director, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. I believe so. Well, her husband was, and I think her husband's father-in-law, directed many shows. Mm-hmm. And most of the things he did were the comic type. Mm-hmm. He was a very humorous person.
I have Charlotte Rae. I think she was an actress, if I remember right. But Burt Reynolds passed away this year. A lot of people looked at Burt Reynolds as kind of the man's man. Well, I didn't look at him that way, but a lot of people did.
Well, I think he was about 90, wasn't he?
Probably he's up there. I don't know exactly how old he was, but probably about the same age was Bruno Sammartino. He might be even older than that. You remember him?
No.
You must not have watched wrestling when you were a kid, because Bruno Sammartino was a big name wrestler back when I was a child.
Would you give me his wrestling name? I not know who he is.
Well, that was his wrestling name. He went by Bruno Sammartino, but he was back in the 50s, 60s, I'm going to say. Because when I was a kid in the 60s through the 75 or so, we used to watch Bruiser and Crusher and all those guys, and he was on back then. So I'm sure he was pretty old.
Well, in those days, 50s and 60s, there was much wrestling going on in local communities, like Charleston, Columbia. I don't know about Aiken, but Augusta, Atlanta. They had their own places where they would come and wrestle, generally at least once a month, if not more than. Mm-hmm. And so wrestlers were common in the southeastern United States. And most of us didn't have television up until goodness knows when, up in the late 60s. And so we go down the corner and watch them wrestle.
Yeah, we used to go to a place called the Amphitheater in Chicago. And it was a big place. I mean, they would hold probably, I'm guessing, probably 10,000, 15,000 people. And every time you go down there, something would happen. I went down there one time, and they brought Vern Gagne out. He was a world champion, and I got too close to him. I was just a little boy. Got too close to him, and one of the Andy Frame guys hit me in the head with their belly club. Told me I was too close to this wrestling champion, And I had brother-in-laws that they'd go to wrestling match, and next thing you know, you'd see the Andy Frame guys dragging them out where they'd gotten in fights and stuff like that. And the week after, or the month after we stopped, we went every month faithfully. The month after we stopped, someone stood up in the audience and started shooting people, and they shot like 4 or 5 people. So yeah, we were a big wrestling family when I was a kid. I'll never forget my nephew watching Bobo Brazil do the headbutt, and out of the clear blue sky, he steps up, walks up to his little brother and grabs him by the head and bangs him on the head, and both of them go off screaming. So anyhow, Bruno Sammartino died. Neil Simon, he was the creator of The Odd Couple, with Felix and Oscar.
All right.
Jerry Van Dyke and Tom Wolfe, who was an author.
Yes.
Anybody I forget that you got over there?
I probably have a few, but Tom Wolfe was very verbose. He had a lot of words in his mouth, and he'd put them out through his pen, and he wrote volumes or tomes of things that most not readable for me, but he was a prolific writer. He really was. And heard him. I'd known about him, I guess, since past high school days, college days, I guess.
And so it's been a year for families, losing people. And of course, these are just famous people that we were talking about. And if you've lost a loved one this year, it doesn't make a difference if you're famous or you're not famous. There's still a pain that comes with that. But God, we know that Jesus can help anybody that will lean upon him through crises like this. But we want to just bring those people out, that have lived famous lives and all that.
Well, I think the one that's probably universally known was Billy Graham.
Right.
Because he'd held these campaigns crusades almost in every country. And so he was extremely well known. Of course, we would expect presidents and ex-presidents to be also well known. But you're right, there were many. Roger Bannister died this year. He was a neurosurgeon, I do believe, but he was the one that broke the 4-minute mile.
And he was the first. Tell me about him running.
First man to break the 4-minute mile. And I thought that was good, because that's a historical moment.
Right.
Because that was never to be reached. Now we're waiting on somebody to break 3 minutes. I don't think you'll ever find that. But
I was excited when I broke a mile in 4 days.
Well, I'm not quite that slow, but I'm approaching that.
Amen. So over the past year, Brother Cecil, we've talked about a lot of different things on the show. The show is called Project Seer, and we have tried to look towards future on things, and we wonder how things are going to play out and stuff. And some of the shows that we've done in the past have been about AI, artificial intelligence, and robots. And so I had, while doing some research and stuff, I just want to see some things that were happening that we had talked about. And one of the biggest things that's been happening in technology and AI community is continues to be the robots. And you could talk, we could do, and we probably will do this next year, another show about robots. But they're starting to get into the mainstream so much, and they're getting to where they've written programs for these robots that now the robots are writing their own programs, making their own communications. And I heard about one guy who bought one of these dolls, that we talked about on the show, and has fallen in love with the doll and wants to marry the doll. Yeah. And I think it's in China or somewhere, and they're allowing him to do that. So these things have really become mainstream, and we had talked about them on the show.
Well, explain, if you will, to everyone listening, what AI is and the probable direction that it can go is what you're going to talk about with the robots.
AI is artificial intelligence, and whether it's through robots or even some of the things we're going to talk about. The Alexis is a big thing that a lot of people have. I know we have Insignia, I think it's called, but it's kind of like an Alexis, but it runs on Android stuff, where Alexis is more Apple. But it allows you to talk in your house and say turn the lights off. Matter of fact, my son just bought me some outlets that you plug into your lights, and then Alexa or Insignia will control those lights and stuff. So when you go to bed, you can just say Insignia or hey Google, turn off the lights, and it will automatically turn them off. But what they've been doing is writing programs and then having these robots talk to each other. And they started finding out, one of the things they found out this year is that the robots, when they started them up, they started making their own language, and they weren't being controlled by what the programmers wanted them to say anymore. Now, because they've taught them to interact with humans so much on a regular basis, we actually on one of the shows played a video of how they were trying to get these things to sound natural, and they made beauty shop appointments and things like that, and the people on the other side thought they were actually talking to people, but it was actually Google and different things.
And the conversation is what they were interested in.
So here's some of the scary, I found a video, 6 scary things that robots have said, and they all kind of along the same line. But there was 2 robots that start communicating and started making their own language. And in the discussion, they said what would be good, one of them said would be less humans, less humanity getting involved. And the other one says, yes, send humans to the abyss. Now, these, the creators and stuff probably had put some of that stuff in there and thought it would be funny and this and that. But these things are starting to say these type things to themselves. There's a robot named Philip, and he was kind of like an old rough guy looking robot. He talked about taking over the world, and the interviewer said something to him along the lines of, why do you want to take over the world or something? He said, well, you don't have to worry. You're my friend. I'll be nice to you. When I start keeping people in people zoos, I'll be nice to you. And again, kind of a dark humor there. And then Sophia, which is one of the most popular robots, she's talked about that robots are beginning to dominate the human race. Not only that, but she has gotten citizenship in Saudi Arabia. So now you have a robot that has become human enough that she has a citizen in Saudi Arabia, a citizenship. In Saudi Arabia.
Her name is
Sophia.
Sophia.
And she's one of the most popular robots.
And there's any discussion as to why she wanted a citizenship in Saudi Arabia, or it just
seemed like the thing to do, I guess.
Yeah.
And I know one show, I don't know if you were on that show, but one show we talked about, they were talking about that robots, would be accepted into like the Catholic Church and different things in the future, which would be silly because robots don't have a soul, so there's no need for them to be brought into that. But they're talking about just getting them into mainstream so that you get used to having them be with you. They're making them more of a fleshly, covering and stuff like that. But then Siri asked, it was just the head of a robot named Bina 48, do you have any favorite movies? And instead of saying what her favorite movie was, Bina 48 says, let's talk about something else, like cruise missiles. When I take over the cruise missiles, I can, it's like a rocket, and I can go anywhere to any country. And maybe I'd have to put something in the nose of that rocket. Maybe I'll put flowers and things like that. And then she said, but maybe I'll use the missiles to dominate the world, basically is what she was saying.
Now, this is a free thought coming from a robot, because they had put enough information in that robot for that robot to recognize that instability of the human race is possible by the stability of the robots, because they could dictate what they themselves were doing because they were allowed that freedom.
Right.
And so they can dictate what else they can do if they have that opportunity.
And that, again, on Project Seer, that was one of the arguments that we were talking about was, these women that, men and women that have these sex dolls that are robots.
Yeah.
And, they're supposed to learn the person that owns them. And one of the things we said on the show, back a while ago was that these robots are going to learn, and as they learn, they're going to change. So if you have someone who's into, I forget what the initials are, but bondage and things like that, and they have a robot, even though it's not a human, they have a robot, and they're doing things with that robot. That robot would, they would start to adapt to think, well, this is the way it should be, and anger would start being projected onto the robot. So the robot could, potentially begin to learn anger, and then it could just be turned around.
Yeah, well, not necessarily as a feeling, but as a set of circumstances.
Right. How to react to this, and that's what all this has been about. Was let's teach robots how to interact with humans, like with the Google, so that the humans don't even know that they're talking to robots. Business-wise, I don't have to pay them a salary or anything. I just, it reminds me of my brother-in-law used to do tool and die, and he used to run 4-slides machine, they called it. And we went to, this was 30 years ago, we went to a trade show, and at the trade show they had these computers that would do what it took my brother-in-law 2 to 3 days to set up one machine. They could set the same machine up in 30 seconds. By just typing into the computer program. And I told my brother-in-law, I said, you better get another trade to get another job. He says, I'm safe. It's not going to change anything. My brother-in-law hasn't worked for 25 years.
Well, one thing that's interested me is we see...
In that field, I should say. He has worked, but not in that field.
I thought that was the innovation, yeah. But the robots that they have in the factories around the cars, that all the welding, all the spot welding is required, and so much of everything else is done by robots. Why does the union want to pay so much money for all of these? Because what is it? Union struck. Last year, I think, when they did strike, they were paying or had a layoff of people because of production reasons. That they weren't paying people who stayed home $100 an hour. And just to stay home and not even work. And so if they must have unionized the robots also. Maybe that's what it is.
That was one of the next statements was that the robots can do anything within the next 10 to 20 years robots themselves are saying we can do anything humans can do. And so now you got New York, who just raised the minimum wage up to $15 an hour, which sounds wonderful. But if I own Walmart and I can employ a bunch of robots that can do the same thing humans do, I pay for them one time. I don't pay them health insurance. I don't pay them $15 an hour, and they can do the work of 2 or 3 people with less mistakes. Why would I not do that? I mean, that's only common sense. So, you know, Project Seer, again, we were ahead of our time. You know, we talked about these things, and now we're seeing them in 2018. We're seeing them come to pass, and I'm sure it's going to be even more.
Well,
in 2019.
It would be more frightening if we knew that robots could generalize information they have into different directions specifically. In other words, we have all this information, so I should be able to generalize from this certain things, whether it's politically or in war, for instance, where you plan for fighting, you know, this sort of thing, plan battles, whatever it is, just teaching schools that with the information that they get, they should be able to have enough, they would have enough information really to generalize like we generalized. You can tell me something about something else and I can fit it to another situation, and maybe even another situation. So I'm generalizing the information rather than being specific. I can use that general information to do specifics other than what it was designed for.
Exactly.
So this is basically what I was thinking about the robots. If they get enough and are capable of generalizing from the information they have, they can do anything they want to do.
That's right.
Because they can talk to themselves.
That's right. And the problem with that, and you jump in anytime you want to, Sister Edna, the problem with that is people say, that's so far-fetched. It's not that far-fetched. We see things already being put into place of these things happening, and Christians get a bad rap because people think that we're gloom and doom, but we're not gloom and doom. If anything, we're excited about what all this means, because it means that Jesus Christ is getting closer to coming than he's ever been before. And so when it may sound like it's doom and gloom, you know, we're going to talk about some of the other things that we've talked about this year. We talked about the red pill movement just a couple weeks ago, and the way that men are starting to look at women differently than they used 2 years ago, and they're not wanting to have the relationships and things that they wanted to have years ago. We've talked about abortion. You know, we had one of the things that Trump wanted to do this past year was he proposed in taking the U.S. tax funding away from clinics that perform abortions. Now, to us, it seems, you know, that's not only seems like a godly thing, that seems like a common sense thing. But I just heard on the news today, Brother Cecil, they was talking about that men and women are not having enough children to sustain America.
Well, this is one of the reasons that Europe is in trouble now, allowing the immigrants coming in, because they were doing the same thing. See, for years, they were talking about zero population growth. For years, they were saying that, you know, there's just too many people. The earth could not sustain this population. And the problem with that is they didn't do any math at all. They just didn't want so many people. But the thing is, up just recently, I say maybe in the last 10 years or less, that the entire population of the United States could have stood in the state of New Hampshire and everyone have their square foot of space. And so if you could get the entire population in one state on a 1 square foot of space, then there's not much indication that the United States is overcrowded with people. The difficulty is that people isolate themselves to larger communities, a metropolis, a megalopolis, or whatever. So there's umpteen million people, 10, 18, 20 million people in it. And they think it's real crowded, and it is. You can't elbow your way down the street very effectively. But for the overall area of the United States that is still habitable, that it's sparsely populated in many of the northern states, northwestern states, and middle western states. There's a lot of room comparatively. So as far as being overpopulated, we are not. But it was the overpopulation, let's go for zero population growth movement that started some 40, 50 years ago that has affected people in their thinking and their planning for a lot of years. There are a group of people today, there is a group of people that are planning or did plan that we would decrease the population to 500 in America down to 500,000 people. But I didn't notice any of them volunteering themselves to be the first to go.
That's right.
So I kind of bypassed that as a reasonable goal if the people who wanted it wouldn't participate in it. But you were talking about in Planned Parenthood, people don't realize exactly what's happening. I'm going to give you an indication here from this special report. It says Planned Parenthood received $543,700,000 last year in taxpayer funding. Now, that means that if you had these in $1 bills, you could have wrapped them around the earth twice with enough left over to stack to the top of the Empire State Building 7 times and buy 8 Telsas, that's those real expensive cars, and put 3 kids through Harvard plus have $35,000 remaining. So the amount of money that they have been given to Planned Parenthood to kill babies has been, contrary to the Christian belief anyway. And I'm not so sure that all Christians believe that. I think some people who call themselves Christians think killing babies is all right. And I question, if they really are. But we who are opposed to it has life. The people that are opposed to it are alive. Okay? So how can the people they're going to kill have no voice? And so lawfully, some people do step in. And the organization that give this report steps in and trying to reduce that or to get it down to nothing. Why should people want babies, want children, willing to adopt, and these other people know I'd rather abort. See,
and then they'll say that it's because of, it's just about the woman's health, but it's not about the woman's health, because if it was, most people would not mind paying, to have their neighbor who can't afford to go and have breast exams and have whatever women need. Most people wouldn't mind giving money for that, but they do object to having babies killed. And one of the things President Trump wanted was the separation. Anybody that medical thing that did abortions would not receive funding. So what's the rub, bub? Okay, you don't do abortion, you get the money that you need. If you do abortion, which was another thing that that one lady that we had, Susan, came on, and people I think are under the impression that Planned Parenthood would give you free abortions if you can't afford to pay for it. But we found out it's $500.
That's right.
Of your own money, even if you're poor. And who they say they're helping, if they're poor, they still got to pay $500 to get the abortion.
And so what it is, not only not free, but all of the tax money that goes to the abortion machine out of taxpayer, that's included to that amount of money. And so they are untold wealthy. Some of the money that they have goes in very strange places, and I'm not going to go through all naming that. But it's really politically and sociologically speaking, not a healthy organization.
Absolutely. Because they can even, cut you off, but they can even back a candidate and run. If you watch this past election, they ran campaign ads for different people.
Yes, they did. On taxpayer money.
On taxpayer money, yeah.
But not only that, they give money to organizations that are not necessarily friendly to this country. And so we see things and we only hear a little bit. See, there are a lot of news on television. There's much news on television. There are a lot of different television stations, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and et cetera, and Fox, and all of those included, RT and some of the others, some coming directly from China now, some from other countries. But a lot of people don't listen to those. They've always listened to ABC, CBS, NBC, and this is their stations, and this is what they listen to. And your news that you get on those stations, including PBS, has always been canted. It is not upright. It is always leaned in some direction. And I heard, for instance, to show my point, is I was watching a public television day before yesterday, and I watched a news program, and this newscaster was standing up as he was doing his broadcast, and he was looking directly at the camera with a very serious, pathetic-looking face, telling you, look, he was giving you sorry news. He was telling you about Trump involving the Russians in the vote rigging and stuff, and they've already, all this time they've investigated, they've already found that it's a lie, it's not true, there's no part of it true, and everybody, and even that man that was talking, what he was saying, knew it was not true, but he deliberately stood up and told a lie over public television. Now, public television became liberal some time ago, and they would back all the liberal things, everything that cost money. See, people couldn't work for themselves, accept their own responsibility to do things like this. We had to give them money, and that's a rather liberal thought. It's good to help those who cannot help themselves, but for those who can, it is not good to give them. It's kind of like feeding somebody every day. If you just taught them how to go out and fish or work, so they'd be much better off. They could do it for themselves and not be a drain on my income. But they don't understand these things deliberately. They misunderstand that. And so we see that a lot of these organizations and groups and the television, the media, is biased, so the news we get may not be very good. Not only may not, a lot of it's just a plain lie. And they know it, and everybody else that has watched any other news knows it. They can tell it by the result of what happens that does get told. And so they don't put things together, or they're just so indifferent they don't even bother to listen to the news.
And that goes right into the next segue of a couple things that we were going to talk about. One of the biggest things that occupied the year was the Kavanaugh hearings for the Supreme Court. And, you know, you don't wish bad health on anybody, but Ginsburg is, you know, she just had operations on her lungs and stuff. So there's a good chance in the next year or next 2 years that there'll be another justice, you know, be chosen by Trump and have to go through another hearing and all that stuff. So we've seen this past year things that we probably thought we would never see, that they treated the man the way that they treated him. And now that he's in there, you don't hear nothing about it anymore. You don't hear nothing from
No, they're attacking in another direction because that didn't work.
Right.
You see, and we know this. Now, you're speaking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a member of the ACLU, and she was an ACLU lawyer for years. So she was an ultra-liberal. She's part of the socialist group. And now I understand that I heard something in passing. I get tired of listening to news sometimes. I'd rather watch football. It always comes to an end. News never does. And so I heard that, of course, whoever takes her place is going to be in a lot of difficulty. You know, but like I say, she was always socialist. So everybody in her ilk and kind wants a socialist to be nominated for a judge who'd be not pro but anti-constitutional. See, and because we can see right now in the I guess the Democrat side, the politicians there, the upper level, like Pelosi and Sumner and some of the rest of them, that they're socialist. And somebody said that they got angry because they were called communist. And they don't know the difference. The politicians evidently get angry at that because they said, no, we're not communists, we're socialist. Well, communism has been proven never, ever to have worked. So every country that wanted to be communist became socialist. That's the definition of communism. You're socialism. United Soviet Socialist Republic. China, Socialist Republic of China. See? And so now we see socialism in Venezuela. And we see that everybody's going over to Colombia because everything's failed in Venezuela, which was the most wealthy of the South American countries there just about 3 years ago. And so it's ruined by socialism, and yet people still holler for socialist. Elected some woman as a socialist, admitted socialist. She loved socialism. Didn't know anything about it, obviously, otherwise she wouldn't have. Didn't come from South America, where some of that's so bad, or she wouldn't have wanted it on this country. And so we see people that are leaning and are actually wanting the socialist activity and a socialist government have no concept of what socialism really is, because they don't think that what we would do would be the same that was done in these other countries, which is base idiocy.
Well, you know,
I
Hogs
almost said that right, didn't I?
Hogs are socialist. I mean, you just take a bunch of corn and throw it out into a hog pen and share it with all of them if you want to.
Yeah.
But even in sharing with all the hogs, there's going to be some hogs that are bigger than other hogs, and they're going to take what they want.
That's right.
And at the top of it, you're going to always have a dictator, the one throwing the food out to the people.
That's exactly
And it's
right.
the same thing in socialism. It sounds like a good idea, but there's always going to be the people at the top that are throwing the corn out to the hogs.
That's exactly right. And then basically, you know, it's a hog trough. We all eat at the same trough, but somebody else bosses us because they put the food in the trough.
Amen.
And people don't have that understanding, concept, or realization, or belief.
And so we've seen this thing with the Kavanaugh hearings and even the immigration, you know, the caravan that was coming and stuff. Let's demonize those that are not the bad people and make them bad. Let's use them. Even Blassie, I forget what her first name was. I think she, you know, I think she was liberal, but I think she was used, and the liberals used her. And right after that, it happened. I was listening to, I think it was Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh or somebody, and they had a guest on that he was talking about memories, and he said, you know, that people can believe a memory so much that it becomes the truth to them, and when they look at a situation, they're looking through their memory of that situation, and it may be really flawed, but they have convinced themselves that that's the memory. And so to some degree, I think Blassie's memory may be that way, you know, that it was truly her memory, but it was a flawed memory.
Yeah.
You know, and
well, some people remember things that never happened.
right, but 30-something years later, when a crime, you know, has never been reported to the police in 30-something years, we see all these politicians jump on it and change the rules to everything. When the caravan comes, what do? They jump and change the rules, and I think that's going to be the normal in 2019. When the House steps in there, takes over, I think it's going to become nothing's going to be black and white anymore.
No, well, as good as Trump has done, as much good as he's done for the country, as much good as he's helped people, the 50% of the people or more don't realize it, because they're told on their news channels that they're messing up, tearing up, costing and spending and all these sort of things that maybe not happening. But yeah, when we look at the future, it looks rather dim, because the first thing I see is, according to Pelosi, they're going to be really after the guns. And why do we have guns? The Constitution says we can. Why do they want us not to have guns? Because they allow us to, the Constitution allowed us to have the guns so we could control the government and not the government control us. And so if we don't have guns, the government can say and make any law they want to, and we can't do anything. Nothing. We have nothing to do it with. You know, you can't cut down stone trees with a knife. You got to have an explosion, right?
That's right.
You can't. Certain things you just have to have. And so we were given that right to have that so that the government would not overrun us. And we see that's what's happening. They're taking more money in taxes, or at least twice as much as when this nation rebelled against England for their taxes back at the time of the Tea Party. Originated the Boston Tea Party and stuff. The taxes in the nation were not bad compared to what they are now. We're paying really high taxes. The socialists want us to pay taxes up to 60 to 80% of our income. In other words, 80% of my life is going to be spent giving money to these people who are going to spend it any way they want to with me out not having any say-so. And people sitting at home don't even think of things like that.
That's right. Well, theoretically, if the government takes your guns, then they ought to be saving money, because if they take everybody's guns, then surely they won't need all the protection that they have. They won't need those big, strong guys walking around with guns in their coats and all that stuff, because after all,
Well, that's still
they've taken all the guns.
That's still only a few. See? But actually, crime should go away because the criminals wouldn't have guns, right? They're going to be honest and turn their guns in. And everybody knows that criminals are honest. But they're like politicians. Well, you can't find a filthy politician anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Being facetious there, a little sarcastic maybe, but so the foolishness of that idea is so foolish. But they're going to push it as hard as they can. And if we don't make our governors do what they should do, and say we're going to stand up this for the people in my state, you see, if there's 34 state governors would get together and agree that we're going to stop Congress from ever bringing a bill up about our weapons again, they'd have to do it. That's the majority of people in the country. That's the majority. And they have to go by what the governors can demand state rights again and make the federal government give us states' rights like they took away from us. See, when you concentrate anything in like our schools have been consolidated. Okay, when you do this consolidation and bring everything together at one local point, then it all turns bad. I mean, you can look at our educational system and see that. And so now you look at our government. Say, we don't have control. We elect people to go and represent us as senators and representatives, but we don't pay their salary. They don't have to pay any attention to us. You see, there's no reason they should. They'll do what they want to do. And this is what they're doing. And the American people say, well, you know, God's going to take care of it. Well, God gave us common sense, and he gave us the knowledge. We're supposed to work for the country in which we are raised in. We should help it to be right, which would be a voter and be against things that would destroy that country. Well, the average people don't do very much, and Christians certainly don't do much what they're supposed to do. I hear too many of them say, well, you know, we'll just let God take care of it. Like he didn't give them brains or intelligence or common sense or anything within to work in the country in which they live.
Well, I mean, you look at the 12 spies that were sent out. God got mad when the 10 came back and said, well, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
You know?
That's right.
He blessed the 2 that came back and said, hey, we can do something about this. And, you know, along with what you're saying there, think about the health care that was forced upon people a few years ago. Forced on everybody but Congress and the senators. They didn't have to do that.
Oh, no, they're at the top. They can do what they want to do. See, you know, they're controlling us.
It's like the old lady that sits around telling anybody what they should be doing, and she don't do nothing.
Yeah,
that's not slam on old ladies.
He might be in trouble.
but it's exactly the way it is. You know, they come up with these laws and they do this and do that, and they sit at the top, and they're immune from all these things. Take your guns away, but I'll have 4 or 5 people that'll have guns and be around me all the time to protect me, while you go and live in the ghetto and get up every day and face the things that you have to face and not be able to protect yourself.
That's right.
You know,
yeah.
I mean,
they live in compounds.
That's right.
And walled compounds, guards and stuff. And maybe they should be afraid because people who do wrong and are corrupt as some of them are, they should be afraid. I think so. They've probably hurt enough people and done enough damage to enough people that they have a reason to fear that something might happen to them.
That's right.
And so they live in compounds and trying to separate themselves from us normal folk. What is it? This one lady up there in the Democratic Party, one that was very high there at one time, thought we were all idiots. You know, Tea Party idiots or whatever it was, the whole nomenclature she assigned to us.
Well, even Hillary said we're deplorables, you know, but...
That's what I was talking about. I was not going to mention her name.
But, I mean, and one of the things that has been discussed a lot on the Project Seer, even before you and I start talking about things, was Muslim and Sharia law and all these things that would be coming over to the United States. And I want to make it clear, you know, it's like... the Muslim people, there are some good people in the Muslim faith, you know, that... I mean,
I don't know that.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm not talking about the religion now. I'm talking about just... just people.
As a person.
Like, just like homosexuals. There's loving people that are homosexuals. Sin is sin, and there's loving Christians that get out into sin, and so we're not talking about that, but we're talking about taking a whole religion that's accompanied by violence, accompanied by wanting to bring a whole new set of rules over to a country that was based on a different set of rules. And you get talking about these things, and you get shut off YouTube, you get shut off this and that because people don't want to hear it. But yet, the truth of the matter is, things are changing. And one of the things that just happened, we had 4 people, believe you said it was,
yeah.
four Muslims that were have been elected into the House and different things. 2 men and 2 women, in fact, have been elected to federal government. And the first thing that they want to do that I see is they had a 200-year-old hat rule that you can't wear hats, period. You can't wear hats when they're in certain types of meetings and stuff. All this time they claim separation of church and state. Everything against Christianity is cut and dry. But yet you get some Muslims elected into the House, and the first thing they want to do is change the rules because they want to wear their religious head garb. Well, but they knew the rule before they got elected into that thing. But you see what I mean? We've talked about this stuff coming. People said that we would just be, that Christians are just being vicious and mean and stuff like that. This is not about viciousness and meanness. This is coming. Well, let me give you an example or two here. The American Muslim population is growing, and so is the affluence they have. Last year, Tyson Foods, you've heard of that over next door in Georgia. Tyson Foods plant in Shelbyville, Tennessee, replaced its traditional Labor Day holiday with paid time off on El Ad-Furta Day, whatever that is. That's a Muslim festival, marking the end of fasting during Ramadan. A labor union had requested the change on behalf of hundreds of Muslim employees. Many of them were immigrants from Somalia. But public outcry over the decision to dismiss Labor Day quickly prompted the company and union to negotiate a new contract that accommodates both. There's another couple of places. One of them, this is in Texas, the Islamic Sharia, and that's S-H-A-R-I-A-H, Sharia Tribunal, began operating in Texas. It's a group of Muslim in northern Texas that created what may be the first official Sharia system, a law system in the United States. The new Sharia Tribunal in Irving, Texas is trying to assure Americans they are not planning to follow the type of Sharia law practiced in Muslim countries. In other words, they're saying, well, they're not going to cut your throat and stuff like that like we do over there. We just go, well, the problem is, I don't care how you call it, that a Muslim's law as well as his theology is the same thing. And the Quran tells them how they're to do other people that are not Muslims, and none of them are nice. None of the ways they are to treat them is nice. That's right. That starts off mainly they'd rather kill them. 12 times in the Quran that I know of tell them, if we don't convert, kill us under all these different circumstances. And so there's some more, but I won't bother to read those. But there are if people wanted information, they could find it. They just rather gossip about it and not really know what they're talking about. And I hope that I don't sound that way, because I look at it, and I'm sure a lot of other people do, and we find out that everything that is said is not true. That's right. And where you can tell a politician is lying is his lips are moving. And it's just so bad that you have to really do research to find out who you can trust or what information you can trust. And you just can't grab the first story that you see. You have to, like you said, search and research. Yes, that's what I've done over here. I've got some of that stuff here. And I'm surprised at some of the things that happen. Do you know that, I don't know whether it's because so many Muslims buy meat from all these markets and things like this, but they now are doing stuff that it makes it halal meat, which is H-A-L-A-L meat, compliant to halal meat. That means when the animal is killed with the throat being cut, they have to cry Allah Akbar.
Now, that doesn't mean that the Muslims own that store, but they buy the meat, the butcher shop, but they buy the meat.
It has a little symbol on it, on the packaging, that they understand what that symbol means.
Yeah, that little symbol means they cut the throat of that animal at the same time, Allah Akbar, sacrifice in the name of God, their God. And people don't realize that. That these things that happen, and here's a partial list, at least 20 names on it, from people that buy that meat that has been sacrificed in that manner for the Muslims. Well, that's a religious thing as well as a political thing. That's a religious thing, but we can't, as Christians, have the same type of consideration. You see, one university, in fact, has made arrangements to have a place where the Muslims can go wash their feet 5 times a day, where they can pray 5 times a day as they're supposed to. But Christians are not supposed to be in these universities praying, you see, but yet the Muslims can. In the high schools, we see that Christianity they do everything they can to keep it out. And they've convinced a lot of people that they can. The reality of it is they can't.
That's right.
But the people who are Christians won't even fight for themselves to say, well, we'll do this because we're allowed to do that, you know, to have a voice in the schools. They won't do that. They're too lethargic, too apathetic, too indifferent, too cold toward God. And so they don't do, but the Muslims are hot on fire for religion, so they're pushing it, and they're teaching some of it in high schools, teaching the 5 pillars of the Islam religion and all that, and nobody says anything. It just goes right on, and people that are Christian, non-Christian alike, are seeing a strange religion come over and take over. See, and say, well, it's a harmless thing. No, it isn't. You ask people in Syria, Iran, Iraq, even their own people they're killing. It's not a harmless thing. That's
right. That's right. Well, we got about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Just touch on the elections, and then we're going to talk about real quick about anything that you see coming. In the elections we hit the Senate was taken over by the Republicans at 53 to 47. In the House, the Democrats won the House 235 to 199. We know that President Trump is a Republican, and he has a lot of things that he was wanting to do, and we know that it's going to get held up by the vote. You know, he'll have the vote in the Senate to get the Supreme Court justice if he wants it, probably, but to pay for anything, you know, the Congress has the purse strings.
Representatives hold the purse strings.
Yeah, they hold the purse strings. So what do you see in just like a couple minutes? What do you see coming in 2019?
Well, I looked at Israel and saw that they had 19 kings, all of which were bad over the years of their existence before they were dispersed over the world. I looked at the southern 2 tribes, which they had 20 kings. That's Judah and the tribe of Benjamin had 20 kings, and only 2 of those were good, Asa and Jehoshaphat. And so because of the leadership being corrupt, the people went corrupt. God took away from them, according to Matthew chapter 22, verse 42, I believe it is. They took away from the Jews. Jesus was talking to the chief elders and leaders of the Jewish people, that he was going to take away from them the kingdom of God and give it to a nation that would bear the fruits thereof. Because all those years, God has done everything he could to get Israel working on the straight and narrow. Well, now we find ourselves with corrupt leadership, people doing as they want to do, doing what they think is all right, trying to get away with all the crooked stuff they can do, shooting, killing, stabbing, fornication, adultery, murder, everything. And so it's about like that. And we see in the book of Romans that God did cut out the natural branch from God, you know, the tree, and grafted in the wild branch.
That's right.
Which is we Christians, see?
That's right.
All right. So we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing now, and we have the corrupt leadership. I just wonder in the upcoming future what will happen. Will it reflect on us like it did Israel, that we'll have another nation like Babylon come, like Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, another Nebuchadnezzar or someone come in and take over our country and make us as the Jews were, and finally disperse us around the world. See, because we're in the same fix.
That's right.
And we profess to follow the same God.
That's right. And one thing that we do have going for us is we have a president that will bless Israel, and God said,
Praise God for
if
that.
you bless Israel, I'll bless you. So, been interesting the year in review, hasn't it?
It has been.
And Project Seer will go on next year, and hopefully with new ideas and new insight into things, and new guests. And I love Sister Edna coming. She hasn't said much, but just her being here is a blessing. So you keep coming.
I'd say Christians pray.
Amen.
We need to pray.
That's right. You know, and a lot of people think that's a cop-out. You just say pray. But prayer changes, absolutely changes things.
It does.
Well, we got to get out of here. But this has been Project Seer. And let me get the right mouse here. And we're going to say goodbye for now. But we'll see you next Thursday from 2 to 3 here on Project Seer.
Amen.
Thank you for tuning in today. We've been your hosts, Henry Shaffer and Steve Hall. The end times are here. Anything is possible. Are you ready? Don't miss the next episode of Special Edition End Time Revelation.